Kesubos Daf Pei Tes begins with a Mishnah and ends with a Mishnah. The daf is all about how we prove that a woman has collected her ksuba, so we can make sure that she's not going to collect it again. We'll have a Mishnah that introduces the topic, how we make sure that it's not collectible a second time, and the Gemara will discuss machokes amarayim, what's pshat in the Mishnah, and a number of other concerns of tricks that might be played and how we get around them. So by way of introduction, the general rule is as follows. The ksuba is a written shtar, a document that the wife has that proves that she's married and contains a record of all the obligations that he has to her. You don't need to have the ksuba. The Beis Din are the ones who are metakein, Chazal were metakein, and it's considered to be a Tanai Beis Din that a man has to give his wife certain payments after the dissolution of the marriage. That as a Tanai Beis Din does not have to be written in a document. Beis Din said he has to have this. It doesn't matter whether he wrote it or not. So the ksuba is not necessary. In fact, the Gemara is going to tell us there are some places in which a ksuba was not written at all. People just relied on the fact that Chazal were metakein and asked to give her certain things. There was no ksuba. So whether she has a ksuba or she doesn't have a ksuba does not prove whether she collected it or not. She could have not had a ksuba because it wasn't written. Of course, she got rid of it. It's not necessary. It's a Tanai Beis Din, and therefore the ksuba has nothing to do with the proof. The ksuba, if she's holding on to the ksuba, if she is holding on to a ksuba, it does to some extent indicate that she wasn't paid the ksuba because she should give it to her husband when she's paid, but it's not a complete proof. Now, the way things generally run is when she comes to collect the ksuba, she brings a get. She brings the document of divorce that shows she was divorced. That's how we know that the ksuba is due. And then she gives the get to the Beis Din when she collects the money, and the Beis Din tear it. They make a tear in it, and they write on the back, the Gemara explains the end of the daf, they write on the back that this tear is not because the get is puzzled. She's still allowed to get remarried. It's a kosher get to get remarried, but we tore it in order to make it clear that she already collected a ksuba and she can't collect again. So the get is the main proof that she's owed a ksuba. It proves that she's divorced and therefore her ksuba is due. And if it's whole, it proves that it wasn't paid. And if it's torn, it proves that it was paid. And there's another problem, and that's that she could always come and claim that she's an almana. That's if she waits for her husband to die, she could hide the fact that she collected a ksuba, she could hide the fact that she was ever divorced, and she could say, I get my ksuba because I'm widowed. Now this is rare because it has to be a situation in which she's divorced and no one knows about it, but such a situation could develop, and she'll come and try to claim a second ksuba even though she already collected it once on the fact she was divorced. She'll come and collect it again after the death of her husband. The way to get out of that is by him holding onto a receipt. So we should lechatchila write a receipt for him, and he'll hold the receipt, and even if she comes to claim it again, the receipt will be proof that he already paid it and he doesn't have to pay it again. However, the problem with receipts is that they get easily lost. So it's hard to obligate a man to hold on to a receipt, just like it's hard to obligate anybody to hold on to a receipt, and therefore we try to avoid coming onto that unless we're stuck, which is what the Gemara will say as we move through the daf. So let's begin the Mishnah now. So the Mishnah says if she brings the get and she does not have a ksuba, she can still collect. She doesn't have to have a ksuba. Some places don't even write a ksuba. She may have lost a ksuba. She's believed to say she lost a ksuba. If she comes with a get, that proves that she never collected, and therefore she's allowed to collect again. If she would have collected once, the get would have been torn because that's the system. You don't have to have the ksuba to collect. Now, what if she comes with the ksuba and she doesn't have a get? She comes with just a ksuba and her husband's alive and she says, I got divorced and I lost my get. He says, you didn't lose your get. The reason you don't have a get is because we tore your get. We ask him, where's the receipt? He says, I lost the receipt. So who do we believe now? So the halacha is we do not allow her to collect without a get. She has to have a get to collect. The lack of a get makes it that she can't collect anymore. If we were to allow her to collect, she may show up somewhere else with a ksuba and claim as an almana. She may say, oh, I was an almana, here's my ksuba. I don't have a get because I was never divorced. She could do that after her husband actually will die. So in order to prevent that, the rule, like we said, is you have to collect with a get. If she doesn't have a get, she can't collect. Now, the same thing is true if somebody wants to collect a loan. Somebody lent money to somebody wants to collect the loan, and it was after Shemitah, so he needs to bring a prosbul. Prosbul is a document that's written that transfers control of the loan from an individual to the court, and therefore it's collectible even after Shemitah ends. A private debt that's not due through the Beis Din, is not collectible after Shemitah ends. So the Gemara says if he comes and he says he lost his prosbul and he wants to collect, so there the halacha is he can't collect without the prosbul, he has to show it. Now Rosh ben Gamliel disagrees partially, and he says the such thing as a shas hasakana, when the nations made it difficult for people to keep mitzvahs. and therefore they couldn't keep prosbol and they couldn't keep hilchos gittin, or if they did, they had to hide the get and they had to hide the prosbol, and therefore it's not a tain against them that they don't have it. And if they don't have it, they're still able to collect both the ksuba without a get and the loan without a prosbol even after Shemitah. All right, now the Gemara begins. The Gemara wants to say that this seems to indicate that she has to write him a receipt, and he has to accept the receipt, and it's his responsibility to hold on to the receipt. How do you see that? Well, besides the fact that the Mishnah mentions that he lost his receipt, the Gemara doesn't point that out. The Gemara points out that she is able to collect her ksuba without having the ksuba there, just by having the get. Now, that's very nice. It will tear the get, but maybe she'll go and collect it again as in almana, and she didn't bring her ksuba now, so she's still holding on to her ksuba. So maybe shortly after she collects, he's going to die. Then she'll come back to a different court and collect as an almana. How do you know that that's not going to happen? Obviously, we're going to write him a receipt, and we obligate him to pay, even though he doesn't get to take back his ksuba, and there's still concern that he could be collected against a second time. So we see that you do force him to accept a ksuba. So the Gemara says that that's a problem because we know that the halacha is that we don't make people accept a receipt. You can't obligate somebody to hold onto a receipt, so that shouldn't be the halacha that he's able to collect, that he has to pay, and he has to agree to watch his receipt, otherwise be collected against again. He should be able to say, I don't want to give any money until I get my ksuba back. So the Gemara gives two opinions to answer, and then a third opinion. So the first, we have Rav. Rav says we're talking about in a place where they don't write a ksuba, and therefore there's no concern she's going to go somewhere else and collect with a ksuba. There is no ksuba, and therefore if she brings the get, she'll be able to collect now, and she won't be able to collect anything afterwards. If she doesn't bring the get, like we said in the Mishnah, she won't be allowed to collect. There's no concern that she'll take the ksuba somewhere else and claim she was an almana, because there is no ksuba. Now the Gemara is going to say later there's a problem. She could always bring witnesses that she was divorced, and therefore you have to have a receipt anyway. But the Gemara skips that for now. That's Rav's opinion. Shmuel says there are two circumstances in which this Mishnah makes sense. The first is very similar to Rav. He says it could be a place where the general minig is that they don't write a ksuba at all, and therefore we assume she doesn't have a ksuba. Shmuel just also points out that if he wants to claim that he wrote her a ksuba and he's afraid that she's going to go collect with it a second time, he has to prove that he wrote her a ksuba. If he can, then the truth is we won't allow her to collect without producing the ksuba. Now, Shmuel says the second half of the situation is that it could just be a place where she brings proof that she never got a ksuba. It could even be a place where there minig is you do write a ksuba, but if she could prove that she never got a ksuba, then she'll be able to collect without having to give back the ksuba, because she's believed, based on her proof, that there isn't a ksuba at all. Now, the Gemara says Rav changed from his first pshat, and Rav said a later pshat. And Rav said that the system is actually as follows. The system is that she can collect part of what's owed her with her get and part of what she's owed with a ksuba, and this avoids all fraud. How does that work? She brings the get. That allows her to get the basics of the ksuba, the 100 zuz for the almana and the 200 zuz for the besula, because that is what's owed to everybody. That's the part that's a Tanai Beis Din, that is the minimum, and that's owed even without the documents. If she just brings the get, that's enough of a proof for that. She cannot collect anything beyond that without an actual ksuba. Now, if she brings the ksuba, she can only collect the extra. She has to have the get in order to collect the main, and therefore there is no problem. If she brings the get, she'll collect the main, she won't be able to collect the ksuba. If she brings the ksuba, she'll collect the extra, she won't be able to collect the main. And therefore, neither document is there an overlap. You can only collect with one, which you can't collect with the other. And therefore, there's never a problem. You have to bring both of them in order to collect the full amount, and therefore there's no concern that anybody's going to collect twice on anything. The Gemara now wants to bring a raya to Shmuel from the second case in the Mishnah. The second case of the Mishnah was where she had a ksuba, she did not have a get, and the Mishnah said she doesn't collect anything. So according to Shmuel, that makes a lot of sense. If she doesn't have a get, so the halacha was, according to Shmuel, she can't collect because she may have collected already based on the get and lost the get, because what we do is she may have collected already based on the get and had the get torn up, because what we do is when she comes with the get, we pay her, and she will have claimed she didn't have a ksuba, and we believed her. And it didn't matter if she had a ksuba or not, and therefore we paid her already. That's why she can't collect now with a get. Now, he may have received a receipt, but he is believed to say he lost the receipt. So therefore, according to Shmuel, I understand why if she doesn't have a get, she can't collect with the get, because you need to have the get. The get is the main proof here. However, according to Rav, that you only collect the basics of the ksuba with a get, and you collect the extra of the ksuba with a ksuba even without a get. So here she should be able to collect the extra. She's coming with a ksuba, she should be able to collect the extra. She doesn't have a get, so she can't collect the main part. She should be able to collect the extra. So Mara says the case over here is where she didn't have any proof at all that she was even divorced. She didn't have a get. She didn't have witnesses that she was divorced. The husband could have easily said, "You're not even divorced. I don't know. You would think I never divorced you." So in that situation, he has a migu. And therefore, the migu is that since he could have said a better time and not owed her anything, the fact that he says that I paid everything, and yes, I agree that I divorced you, but I paid everything, and I just lost the ksuba, and that's why you don't have a get. I lost the receipt, that is, and we allowed you to keep the ksuba, but I paid everything, therefore he's believed to say that. Someone asks, hold on a second, we're talking about where there's no proof that she's divorced at all, so what's part of Shimon ben Gamliel? If Shimon ben Gamliel said she could collect the full amount without a get, it's B'shas HaSakana, she could collect the full amount without a get. How's that? We don't even know that she's divorced. We don't have any proof that she's divorced. How could she collect anything? So says the Gemara, the entire Mishnah therefore must be Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, and it's all one statement together, and there are some words missing from it. And this is what it means to say. If she doesn't have the get, she really shouldn't collect anything. Like the halacha is, you need the get to prove that she's divorced and to prove that she hasn't collected, because the bezin will tear it up once she collects the ksuba. When is that? That's when there are no witnesses that she was divorced. However, if she has witnesses that she was divorced, she's allowed to collect the main part of the get and of the ksuba and the rest of the ksuba. Now, if she has her get with her, then she can collect. If she doesn't have a get with her, then she can't collect anything. And again, the reason is because we're afraid she's going to try to collect the second time. However, min hasakana, and then we can't expect her to keep the get, she is allowed to collect without the get, and this is only based on the fact that she has witnesses. Shimon always says, from the time of sakana, a woman can't be expected to hold on to her get, and she collects the ksuba without a get, and a Baal Choiv collects his debt without a prosbol. Now we might have some questions about more potential fraud over here and how Rav's opinion works. So we said, according to Rav's opinion, she can only collect the main part of the ksuba if she actually brings the get. So the Gemara says, what should she do if she's widowed? She never got a get. So first we'll talk about if she was widowed after Nisuin, and then we'll talk about if she was widowed after Erusin. So the Gemara asks if she was widowed after Nisuin, how is she supposed to collect anything? She doesn't have a get. So the Gemara says simple. She has to bring proof that her husband had died, and then that's just as good as a get. Then we don't have to worry about her collecting with a get. She never got a get. We don't have to worry about her collecting a second time earlier or later by showing the get, and therefore she collects by bringing witnesses that her husband had died. Says the Gemara, but maybe she got a get and we didn't know about it. Maybe she got a get just before he died and she collected with it, or she's gonna collect with it, and then she's gonna collect twice, once with the get and once based on the death of her husband. So Gemara says if a husband gave her a get in secret and quietly, and he didn't tell anybody about it, it's his own fault, and he deserves to lose the ksuba twice, or at least his estate does, once based on the get and once based on the fact that he died. So this is where, okay, but what are you going to do about an almana? I mean, Erusin, if she was divorced from Erusin, she never lived in her husband's house. Nobody would know if she was divorced. They were only mekudeshes. They were living in separate houses. Maybe he gave her a get. She went and she collected based on the get, and then he died. So she'll go and collect again with witnesses that he died. How could you allow her to collect without a get? How could you make her require a get? Either way, you're going to end up with a potential fraud. So the Gemara answers, you're right. It has to be that he gets a receipt. We said earlier that you don't make the husband, you don't make the Malva keep a receipt. It's too hard for him to watch. The answer is there's no other solution here. What else are you supposed to do? He could potentially get defrauded. She has to be able to collect as an almana, and if she brings witnesses that he died, he could get frauded. Therefore, he has to hold on to the receipt. And the Gemara says it has to be the way, because leave get out of it. She has witnesses that he died. Let's say she has two different pairs of witnesses that he died. She'll bring one to one court and collect. She'll go to a different court with the other pair and collect again. Obviously, the only solution is for him to hold onto a receipt, and we do that because there's no other way. The Gemara now says, hold on a second, you're making an assumption here. You're making an assumption that if a woman's in Arusa, never had Nesuin, and she comes to collect her Ksuba, she doesn't have to bring the actual Ksuba document with her. That's what you're saying, because otherwise there's no way she could collect twice. One time she could collect with the Ksuba, but then she's not going to be able to hold on to it anymore. So you're saying she's going to collect twice, once with the Ksuba, once without a Ksuba. Who says that an Almanam and an Erison can collect without a Ksuba? That which we said that there is ksuba for an almana min ha'irisin, maybe that's only if it's actually written. How do you know that there's a tanai based in on irisin that she collects the ksuba even without a written document? So the Gemara has two mishnayos as a source, but the Gemara says both of those could be where it was actually written. So the first one says as follows. The first one says that a woman who is widowed or divorced, whether from Erisin or from Nesuin, collects a ksuba. So, and the phrase is she collects the entire ksuba. So the Gemara says that could easily be talking about where it was written. She was actually given a ksuba. And you ask me what's the chiddush that she collects it if she had one written for her. The chiddush is not like Elazar ben Azari, who says it was only written with the understanding that it was going to come to Nesuin, but was never meant to be collected if she never came to Nesuin. So it's coming to tell me, even if she never did Nesuin, it is collectible. As a matter of fact, there's a pretty solid proof that it's only talking about where she has a written ksuba, because it says she collects the entire ksuba. How should she collect the entire ksuba, meaning including extras? If there's no written shtar, how can she collect more than the basics, what the Chazal mandated? Obviously, it's talking about there's a written one. Now, the second brisa is a brisa that says that if somebody's in Arusa, a wife who is in Arusa does not have to do aninos and is not metame for her husband, and he is not metame for her if he's a Kohen. If she dies, he does not inherit any of her property because she's only in Arusa, didn't come into his rishos yet, and if he dies, she collects ksuba. So there you see clearly she does collect ksuba even when she's in Arusa. However, this could also be that it was written for her, so you have no kasha. If you ask what's the chiddush is that he does not collect from her, he does not inherit her if she dies. So therefore we still have no source that she can collect ksuba min erison without an actual ksuba document. We now begin the next Mishnah that discusses what happens if there's more than one ksuba between the same husband and wife and more than one get, or a get and a misa. So the halacha is as follows. If there's two separate marriages, that means that he married her, divorced her, and married her again, and divorced her again. So then there could be ksuba for both of them. It only works out if the time, the date that's written on the ksuba lines up. So that would mean if there's one ksuba and then there's a get with a date later, and then there's a ksuba that is later than the first get, and then there's a get that's later than the second ksuba. So then it makes sense. They got married and divorced, and then he wrote her a new ksuba and remarried her, and then divorced her again. And then you could have two ksubas. However, if there's two ksubas and then there's a get afterwards, even if there's another get later, then there's only one ksuba that's owed, because the two ksubas are written for the same marriage, and when he remarried her a second time, he did not write a new ksuba. The same is if there's a ksuba and then a get and then another get. He obviously remarried her and divorced her again, but he didn't write a second ksuba, and therefore it all goes based on the first ksuba. Same thing happens if there's a ksuba and then a get and then a misa. So he remarried her again, or not, but there is no second ksuba that's written, and therefore there's only the first ksuba. You could remarry based on reinstating the first ksuba, and you don't owe a whole nother ksuba. Gemara now begins. The Gemara first asks, in the case of this two ksubas, both before a get, we said he can collect it. She can collect the ksuba. That implies either one, even from the first ksuba. Now, the first ksuba has a greater shibud on property that was sold. If property was sold between the date of the first ksuba and the second ksuba, the first ksuba has a lien on that property and can take it away from the buyer, while the second ksuba does not have a lien on that. The implication is that she can collect based on the first ksuba and take that property away from the buyer that bought later. Now, that would be not like what we learned in the name of Rav Papa or Rav Nachman, who said that you can't, and the second ksuba cancels the first one. The second shtar cancels the first one, and you can only collect from the time on the second one, not from the time on the first one. So the Gemara answers that there is a scenario in which you can collect based on the first one. That's if something based on the second one, or the first one. That's if something is added to the second one. Therefore, the second shtar, or the second ksuba in this case, is adding something. Is not meant to cancel the first one. Not meant to change the date. It's just meant to add a property or a tree or something, whatever is added into it. And therefore, the shibud from the first time still stands, and the second shtar, second ksuba, just adds more property. Now the Gemara quotes a brisa that says, what happens if there's a get, a ksuba, and a misa? Misa means witnesses that he died. So it says if the get comes before the ksuba, then you can collect 2 ksubas. If the ksuba is before the get, then you can only collect 1 ksuba. Because somebody who divorces his wife divorces to go back to the original ksuba. That means if the get is before the ksuba, that means this is the second ksuba. So there was a previous ksuba before the get, and then after the get, he remarried her and wrote another ksuba. That's 2 ksubas in the same couple, 2 marriages. If, however, they are afterwards, so then there's only 1 ksuba. When he remarried her, he stuck with the original ksuba, so you can only collect 1.